So I'll quickly introduce our speakers. Ahmed, we've heard from already, but he's doing exciting stuff in the Middle East in multiple countries, which is why I wanted him on this panel. Yeah, and also with startups and with big companies. So I think there's a really interesting insights we should be able to get from Ahmed. Thank you. Jasmin Karatas, we've not really heard from yet, apart from she's been asking great questions from the audience on both days. And she's Turkish, living and working in Germany. And I think there's some really interesting insights we can get from that, plus the fact you're doing loads of work in gamification and design, and you've been in design for years. And it'd be interesting to see what differences and things we can find.
Yeah.
And Sylvester, what can we say about Sylvester? Sylvester, as we heard from already, he's doing loads of stuff with lots of different gamification projects. He has to work all across the EU delivering them. And I noticed the other day that he was in Malaysia delivering some of it as well. So I think there's some really interesting aspects we'll be able to get from our three speakers. Okay. What I actually wanted to start with was... Don't tell me you got too hot in England.
Yeah.
What I wanted to start with was just by asking our speakers for an example of a gamification project they've run or been involved in that's been across different cultures or countries. And I feel like I should pick at random instead of being diverse and whatever. I'm just going to start with the person next to me. So Ahmed, could you start us off on this?
Okay, so I've been working on a lot of projects inside the Middle East, and some of them are in Europe. The diversity of culture was amazing. If you don't know who you are targeting, it's totally different. And when you design for Europe, if you try to apply the same design in Middle East, then you're crapped, literally, and your design will be thrown away. It's about understanding exactly the mindset and what the customer is waiting from you. It's totally different. And not only from a persona point of view, but also what kind of mechanics that you are going to use. So I'll give you a quick example that in the Middle East, you would use more competitive approach than cooperative approach. And that would be more engaging even in cooperation. So people are more engaged in competition to cooperate. Well, in Europe, as far as I see in my designs, cooperative approach get cooperative results. With competitive approach get competitive results. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, this is one of the designs diversity which I worked on.
Good start. Thank you. Jasmin.
So we working with IT consultancy, Accenture Interactive, and we are more than 400,000 people, and we rolled out a gamification internally. It's now since there a couple of years, and we have quite good insights of that. The most important thing was that we figured out, okay, that the Indians work totally completely different than us. Very competitive. We had this talk with, okay, it worked the other way around. Now I'm with minus, and I think it was you. Was it you? Yeah. Minus whatever.
Minus 26,000.
Yeah,
26,000.
Two people
well,
resigning.
Yeah, and as well today we heard he cheated from Andre, sending 8,000 emails. This is what our colleagues in India are doing to get the point or badges, because they are measured by those stuff in the performance achievement. And this is something, or they put it in there somehow, I don't know. And we are not allowed in Germany to measure people on that, so we don't do. And people are not engaged on the system because they don't know when do I get what badge and what do I need to do. There are some explanations, but it is not, for them it needs to be kind of, how should I say, intuitive, that they understand when they're involved in it, and they want it to be more, I'm the individual who's standing for that. They want it to be recognized for a thing. And as well, level is quite interesting in Germany and as well in Europe, because for a manager, it's more easy, to get likes or whatever now in terms of speaking of recognition than for someone who is not a manager but down. He needs much more information and good information to get maybe attract others and hire people. So this is something we figured out, and it depends quite a lot in what level if you have hierarchy, in what hierarchy you are, what is your culture, do you have as well backgrounds within laws and stuff you have to figure out? This is very, very important, especially in Europe. And then this is something which need to be built in the system of gamification, because instead it won't work.
Super. Sylvester.
Sometimes it feels a bit strange being a Malaysian and working with partners across Europe and whatnot, and based in the UK. Sometimes it get a bit confusing for me. It's like in terms of trying to see how I can actually work with different stakeholders, not only the stakeholders and the audience that we are trying to work with, but the partners who are actually working with me as well, because of the cultural differences, the way they do things in different countries. For example, in Germany, they do things differently compared to the one in Spain, and then the one in Italy is all piano. Yes, so it's a huge challenge to get everyone together to agree on the agenda of what we need to do. And I was telling them, that the only way for us to do this is to co-create with the stakeholders in the different countries. That's why yesterday I was emphasizing on how important it is to co-create, to work with the stakeholders, because they have different needs. We can't actually provide a solution that can address the different schools, because the project I'm talking about is beacon. So we are working with schools in 8 to 9 different countries, including Turkey as well. So what we find is that the differences are in the way the schools would accept solutions which are based on gamification, who we have to speak to in terms of the government, the ministry, the head teachers and whatnot. It is quite straightforward in the UK, because in the UK it's all about, if the schools are with you, they will implement it, no problem at all. But if you go to places like Turkey, for example, you have to convince the Ministry of Education to actually do it. So there's cultural differences there, and the fact that working in Malaysia as well, because we are working with different schools in different parts of Malaysia, we have to actually work with the head of the village. So we need to understand the hierarchy. You need to understand who you should speak to first before you can implement any gamification solution. Yeah.
I think that's a really great background to the cultural differences. Yeah. Now, this being the conference theme, not yet. I've got questions of my own that I want answered. But this being a conference about learning from failure, what I really want to hear from next is, what have you seen go wrong because of cultural differences or country differences? And I'm going to start with Sylvester.
Right. For me, I think when we were working with the guys in Malaysia, when we first went in there, we will be all boasted. This is a new thing in the Western countries. This is what we're doing. So it's working where we are. And they just look at us saying that, is this one of the first things someone said to us, who was a teacher, is this another one of this American bullshit? So I said, no. So yeah, so they don't like big terms or something that sounds a bit market driven type thing. So when we explain the actual context of using or getting inspiration from games and play, in designing experiences for the students, say, oh, we get it now. And they say you should have just started with play, which is the purest form of what gamification is trying to do. It's trying to add a bit more fun and a bit of engagement in these solutions. So yeah, so there was an epic fail. I feel like but I learned from it, and they love it. The fact that I said, okay, it's my fault for trying to use these big words, trying to impress everyone, saying that this is a new thing, it's coming in, but yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's about time we heard epic fail at the conference.
Yeah.
Jess?
So as well, what we observed is if you not respect business culture, the cultural background of the company, because if you not respect that, you as well lost, because this is the way people are hired into a certain kind of area, so a certain kind of business, certain kind of culture. Every business has a certain culture. If you don't respect that, you fail as well. So it's not just about the people who are using it or the cultural background of them. So because there is immense, we fail completely in this just putting points, badges and leaderboards, making it not obvious, and we learned quite a lot. We try now to change it, but it takes quite a long of time. So we had there our massive internal failure, by the way, to be honest. But we learned
Tell
out
us
of
more.
that.
What was the massive internal failure?
That it didn't, our internal, gamified model we had internally, it's not working, as I said, for Europe. So there need to be different triggers. For India or for others who are competitive driven, works perfectly fine, but not for Europe and America not. So we have to find a way through what we want to change there. So this is the thing where we massively kind of failed as well internally. However, this is something where I wanted to say, not only thinking of personas, thinking as well of life phases, because life phases doesn't care if you're female or male. And this is what we try as well work with as well with the business culture, because this is very, very important to understand as well the culture of the business, because people who are working in the company are different than working out, and not working outside, but in their pleasure time are different. So it differs really well where you apply and how and what you apply.
Oh, we're getting into the answers to this now. But,
Yeah,
but I
sorry.
want one more failure from Ahmed. Because we had a great one yesterday. Let's have some more.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I'll give two examples. I'll say yesterday's example for those who didn't attend. We designed a gamification experience for a startup company, and they wanted a pointing system. So I designed the equation of the pointing system and told them to apply it. And what happened is I flew away and gave the administrator everything, and we play tested, so it's all ready to go. And what happened is the startup started to give a learning event before the launch of the gamification, like 2 weeks before the launch, and they launched the gamification event. And what happened when they launched the gamification event is they wanted the people to feel the power of the event they made them attend. And so they gave them negative points so that people can try to give back for what they took, you know. And so the gamification started with a huge negative point. And so as a designer, I told them, allow me to be like one of the employees, so get me inside the journey. And I received a message telling me that I'm negative 9,300 points. And my friend called me telling me that he received a message of negative 26,000 points, which he told me shouting, should I keep trying my entire life to reach a zero? Okay. So the idea is you need to understand the culture that you're trying to. And when I left the thing with the administrator, I should have learned that the culture of the administrator will not be able to understand the differences, because the administrator didn't even have a little bit knowledge even about marketing. If he knew about marketing, this wouldn't have happened, you know. So this one was one. The second one, I've designed a gamification experience for a multinational company that's based in Middle East, okay? So it's not a corporate from US and coming to the Middle East. So the original base was in Saudi Arabia, and there was an Egypt part of the company and Pakistan, and you know, diversity. But the interesting thing is there was countries from outside the Middle East, from Middle Asia and Far East. So the thing is, I've designed, the initial design was only for Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And so I was considering the culture very much. It's very restricted, especially when one of the most restrictive countries. And the design was very restrictive, careful design. And the company said, wow, we got great results. We will apply that to all of the countries without asking me about anything. And I found out, boom, 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 everything was crashing everywhere, because they tried to apply in Pakistan what they were applying in Egypt, and that was an epic failure, because Pakistan is totally different culture and totally different. They are motivated and happily competing with each other. So they feel happy when they are competing with each other, and they feel they are more productive this way. While in Egypt, when you inspire this kind of culture, you start people start getting alerts from each other, and oh, this guy, he's starting to hate me or something. So they start hiding their points. Don't look at my points. Because showing the points of a competitive, they feel that things will go over and become more rude in a way or another. So the understanding of culture, especially in a culture that has a huge diversity, in education specifically, is huge. And for example, when I design for a gamification for Egypt, I need to understand, even in the same country, which part of the country I'm designing. Because if you're designing for North Egypt, it's totally different if I'm designing to the south of Egypt, because the level of education is totally different. And so the mindset that are receiving the motivation is totally different, and how it will react with it is different.
That's very interesting. I keep trying to think of solutions as we're going along, but that's not what the panel is about right now.
Yeah.
It did lead me to another question. One of the things I was reading the other day in research was that things like self-determination theory that we've been hearing all about, and all these psychological research, we're basing everything we do on science. If you dig deeper, mostly all the psychological testing has been done on psychology students in the US. Okay, so it's a biased data set right from the start. And I was wondering, because of that, and the fact, particularly in the UK, we bias everything to delivering in English as well. Does the use of language have much effect on the cultural aspects of gamification? Yeah? Because I'm guessing we default to English, even potentially in Egypt, and especially as soon as we go cross-country. What are your experiences? Who'd like to start?
Well, I can start. Using Malaysia as an example, because Malaysia is very diverse, different ethnicity. We got the Malay Malaysian, Indian Malaysian, Chinese Malaysian, and we got the tribes. I'm one of the tribes in Borneo, so it's like 1 out of 20 different tribes. So we have Malay as the national language, but we don't speak it, but we speak Manglish. Manglish, like Malay English. So the way that I sort of like talk about gamification when I'm in Malaysia, I try to use Manglish a bit, because it helps me to convince that I'm one of you. So I think, but yeah, it's the language itself is not a problem in terms of using, creating a gamified solution that is actually mostly English, because now the government is very much pushing for the language. So that is not an issue, but it's just the way you translate, or the way that you convince, or the way that you work with them would have to be more sensitive to their needs, their language, whether there's any language barrier or not, or whether there are any cultural differences in terms of the design that we've used in the UK and then use it in Malaysia. And the fact that when we start to agree that play is the key thing in what we're trying to do, they say, oh, we don't have to look to the West because we've got our own local playful solutions that we've created ourselves. Can we use this to teach math, science, and yeah, why not? If you want to use them, remold it, remix it, and create something like that is your own. Because I believe in gamification in terms of the sense of autonomy and ownership and agency. I think are the 3 key things to encourage people to really implement gamified approach. I think, yeah.
I think that's great. I think one of the things that I was interested in is whether the use of English potentially excludes the people we're trying to motivate, or even demotivates them as well.
I mean, here it is as well important to look again, if you the tone in your company as well, so the tone of voice you're having as well. If it is an international company, probably all is in English. However, a lot of people are excluded by English because they don't understand it properly, so they feel more convinced using their own languages, because it is a difference. I mean, now speaking of Turkish and German, I mean, you can have multiple words in Turkish with a slightly different meaning, which says you're my heart, you're my soul. Okay, that's a song, but something like what we would say honey in English, but they use slightly different words, and probably it's the same in Egypt. So they use really a lot of words to slightly differ between different meanings, but for them it makes huge differences, choosing those words. And in German, we have German is nice to use as a language because it's really strict, and you know what you get. So it's really, it's a flying thing is a Flugzeug. It's flying up in the air. That's quite easy to understand. So, but this makes as well the difference. So look as well at the tone of voice. This is, I think, more important than just the language, because it differs quite a lot. Are you flippy? Do you use, as we have it, like a C, which is like stupid to use in gamification, sorry to say that, but some clients want that, and you have to explain to them, okay, maybe not the best idea to do. However, it's part of their culture, and people would not accept to have a U in it. So this is something I learned quite a lot. The tone of voice is really, really, really important to bring your message to the people.
Ahmed, what would you like to add to this?
Okay, I can't add that. Well, the difference in I'll give a very practical example here. We had a gamification course that was coming from the US, and we needed to turn it into Arabic version in my previous company, and we found out a lot of words that it was taken same as it was going to do a disaster in the course. So as a very simple example is, it's like the barn, okay? And we were going to Saudi Arabia, and that was, if we actually did this, we might get like killed at that spot, because it's very strict to talk about something like wine in this area. So and the course, it was very, very friendly course. So it has nothing to do with that. It's just a symbol for the journey of the course. And I've talked with the course owner, and we told her if we actually use that, it's going to fail miserably. And she told us, do whatever you see the best. And this is where I always say that culture understanding and having someone from the culture be your partner to tell you about the tricks about this culture is critically important. As someone who was working in corporates, I'll tell you a little bit about a trick here. So when it comes to a corporate, corporates in the US do business in a way, but if it was applied the same way in the Middle East, it was going to be a huge failure. And that's why you need centers in that countries that understand the mindset and the concept of how people can work there. So in the region of the Middle East, even the difference between the Gulf countries and the North African countries is different. And so just a quick example is they don't even all of them speak the same Arabic language. They each country of them has a huge differences that they call it Egyptian Arabic or Gulf Arabic. Sometimes it's Saudi Arabic or United Arab Emirates Arabic, or which Arabic are you? So that Moroccan Arabic is not understood by most of the Middle East. So even it's in the same region, it's very critical to understand what are people listening to, what are they behaving, and how are they receiving your information.
Now, I've got loads more questions for you, but I think it'd be only fair to pass some out to the audience. And I chose the microphone with the longest cable so that I could do this.
This is less a question, more an observation. It links the two panels together. You might have noticed I'm a woman, most of the time, but I also have a background in export sales and marketing in a range of different industries. And everything I've heard is not just pertinent to gamification, it's pertinent to pretty much every single industry. But everything I'm hearing as well is that actually is what Marika said earlier this morning, which is about human behavior, values, desire, emotion and culture. And it's about flipping it from what we want, what I want, to what you, as my user, might be motivated by, or what you want. Because from a sales point of view, if I don't understand you, I'm never going to sell you a product. And it's the same with a game. If I don't understand you, what your language is, how you behave, what your gender is, whether you've got kids or not, whether you like asparagus, it may be pertinent. The more I know about you, the more chance I've got of getting it right for you, because I don't count, really.
But this is as well something which brings us to a breaking point, because this is the problem as well, not the problem but the struggle.
Particularly in Germany. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Particularly in Germany, we have quite strict rules on that. So, and there's coming, as I talked to Andre, next year in May, there's coming this GPR, law, which makes it really hard to give a benefit to people. It's on the other hand, it's good that we have something like that people know what's happening with the data, because we don't know what's happening with the data. But yes, it's right. The more you know of the people for whom you are designing, and that's the reason why I think that everybody of us is a kind of a designer, understands for whom and for what and why we are designing, the better we are. And I truly believe that we're not digged deep enough to look in ourselves as well, accepting maybe who we are, what we're doing, what we're capable of. Because ourselves as well having multiple personalities in us. And sometimes we already know the answer by observing the stuff. The thing is, and I cannot answer it, but I myself ask me the question, is it better to design it really, really individualistic, so for every hyper-personal, or is it better to leave it more open?
My colleague, Will, is in the next session. It's all around choice. And sorry, I'm from Through Radical, and we did the app. And my colleague Will is talking in the next session all around the thing of choice, and you're absolutely right. And what we find works very successfully is actually having a basic fundamental structure, but then giving the person who's engaging an element of choice. And we find engagement levels or redemption rate, whatever that is, significantly increases because of that element of choice and the buy-in.
Which makes it complex to design.
Okay, I have a small comment about that. It's about understanding the person in front of you. And sometimes we think that we understand the person in front of us. If you don't have the data.
You're right.
If you don't have the data. I'll give you a quick example about that. 10 years ago, I was playing a massive multiplayer online game, and I have a US friend, and I was going to the club I was a goalkeeper back then, so I was going to my training, and she told me, where are you going? Why are you leaving the game now? And I told her that I'm going to the club. She told me, what? Do you have clubs in Egypt? And I didn't even understand the question first. And she told me, you have camels, right? And, and I was like, no, we don't. You don't. No, we don't. And actually, she told me, do you have swimming pools? And then I started, is she trying to make fun, or is this serious question? But the problem is, those were serious questions. The problem is that, and this is a little bit my point of view, it's not about gender or culture or whatever. It's about that we have personas created in our minds for peoples, okay? So if I heard that there's someone from Egypt, then I'm looking at a pharaoh there. That's why I got out this. This is the pharaoh who rides a camel, and they are coming from the pyramids, and all this stuff. And if I look at someone from Europe, it's the white guy who has this stuff. And if we are looking at someone from Asia, it's the guys who work really hard, and they are working like day and night all day. It's actually, we have previous made personas in our mind that conflicts with what we are trying to design. And that's when a designer tries to design, he needs to understand that all the data you have try to make it wrong previously. All your data is wrong. Start from this place. So you need to correct it first, because most of your data are not based on anything. It's just your imagination or something that you read and probably didn't validate, right? So when it comes to understanding the person in front of you, how would you understand him is very important, right?
I think for me, it's like I think we have a huge role in ensuring that the younger generations who are at school now will, would learn about, not being gender bias and cultural bias and whatnot. I think we need to educate. I think it is important because for myself as well, I do have biases, stereotypes, and people who engage with me as well. Because the first thing they say, is Sylvester your real name? What do you mean? You're from China, aren't you? No. So yeah, so I'm so used to that. So I thought myself, it's like we need to educate people to be more aware of their surroundings. Hence, yesterday I was talking about a more hybrid approach and try to understand what's happening out there in the world and try to understand the people around you because we can't design for every single person. But if we can find the commonalities in terms of the interests and any differences, those are the Easter eggs that we can add to the design in terms of helping them to discover how they can personalize that, their own experience by accepting the commonalities between themselves and the other players or users of the system, I think. Yeah.
That's a really interesting bit. I think we've got time for one more question. And I see lots of people have been trying to catch my eye, but the first to succeed was actually Anne.
Finally.
And I got knocked first time round. So it's a really good question. I actually want to know, in the experience you have of different cultures, is there a bigger appetite in certain cultures for gamification or not? And where do you see those differences being? And how do you use that in terms of co-creating the solutions you make?
I can start. So what I observed quite a lot is, especially between Turkey and Germany, is that, and doing some gamification workshops there, if you give Turkish people, like when they're not in a business background, and as well not in a business background in Germany, the opportunity to experience something new, they are more eager to adapt it, and they're more playful, and they try more, they try to experiment more, and they okay, I have to admit it was as well a really creative group in Turkey, or groups in Turkey, so you have to as well differ between those cultural backgrounds and as well religion in there, but those guys were really open for change, and they wanted to experience those stuff. And this is what I found out, that they are quite, they want to risk things. They really wanted to leave some